The Hunt is a substantial change of pace for the Twilight Zone, and in my opinion, it was a good one. We see everything from the setting, characters, and tone shift to something more lighthearted and even hopeful. I'm not saying that this show was always devoid of those things, but it became rare to see an installment that was this unabashedly sincere. This was all thanks to a new writer on the series that would put his signature stamp on the show going forward. Hyder Simpson lives with his wife Rachel and loyal dog Rip in a cabin located within a lush rural area. Ignoring his spouse's interpretations of unnatural warnings she's perceived, Hyder takes Rip out hunting that evening. Things go south when Rip chases a raccoon into a pond and doesn't immediately pop up. Worried, Hyder dives in after his hound, but soon enough, the water goes calm, and the raccoon pops up out of the pond unharmed. The next day, Hyder and Rip wake up beside the water and head back home. When he reaches his property, Simpson sees a pair of young men digging a grave and burying a dog. They don't respond to his words, which he chalks up to them grieving the pooch, so he paces back to the cabin, where he sees his wife dressed all in black, crying. The local reverend and a few family friends confirm that Hyder and Rip are dead. This is the day of Simpson's funeral. Incredulous, Hyder follows the procession up to the gravesite, but is stopped by a fence he's never seen before. He takes Rip along as he follows the barrier to a gate, where a man checks him in. The gatekeeper says Hyder has reached heaven, but when Simpson tries to enter with Rip, he's told that dogs aren't allowed inside. There is a place for hounds up the road, however Simpson can't attain his eternal reward with his beloved friend in tow. The Hunt was written by Earl Hamner Jr. He had a version of this story cooking for years, and in a lot of cases, those can make for very good final products because of the passion behind them, as I think was the case here. He'd go on to write 7 more episodes, including Jess Bell and You Drive, while joining the likes of Richard Matheson, George Clayton Johnson, and Charles Beaumont as one of Rod Serling's go-to scribes. Hamner actually met Serling in the 1940s and sent him a few Twilight Zone ideas following the show taking off. After Rod responded that he'd bring the concepts up to the other decision-makers at the show, producer Buck Houghton called Hamner back to say that they were interested in developing 2 of his ideas into episodes. This was the first. Hamner's popular work didn't stop with the Twilight Zone. He continued on after this to create The Waltons for CBS and had many more writing and producing credits before his death in 2016. He said in the audio commentary for The Hunt that growing up in Virginia made him want to see people from the American South represented better than uneducated hillbillies. The Waltons certainly saw that representation, but years before that on The Twilight Zone, even though there were still some stereotypical aspects involved, this installment showed signs of a deeper, more authentic take on that culture. The Hyder and Rachel characters were admitted to be early versions of what the grandparents on The Waltons turned into. Their brief scene together is very sweet, and you can feel both's pain after he's passed on. The age makeup on Jeanette Nolan is a tiny bit distracting, though it doesn't take away from her time on screen. Nolan would come back for another Hamner-written episode the following year, Jess Bell. It's a bit disappointing that the writer didn't completely love how this installment turned out. While he was delighted and surprised the episode was made, he specifically had an issue with actor Arthur Honeycutt's portrayal of Hyder Simpson. He was quoted in Mark Zickry's The Twilight Zone companion book as saying, quote, "The actor played the role of the old man much too seriously. He should have had fun with the role rather than treating it so literally. It required kind of a homespun, tongue-in-cheek approach. Let's relax. This is a romp," end quote. While I understand the criticism from the guy who created the character, I personally found Honeycutt's acting quite endearing. It was a nice break from the show's more cynically written protagonists. I'm not saying it's some Emmy-worthy performance, but I saw sincerity break through, and it was an enjoyable time following him into a more innocent story of the afterlife.
Well, any place that's too high for looting for Rip is too fancy for me.
Did I mention that if you're a dog person, you're going to love this episode? If it wasn't obvious, a large portion of this tale is a love story between man and man's best friend. And I have to say, the dog they got to play Rip is one adorable pup. There's a tangible chemistry between these two that makes the atmosphere even more likable. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up one-time TZ director Harold D. Schuster. This was one of the last pieces he helmed after a near 30-year career in the industry. There's nothing that stands out too much about his directing here, but that may have worked to the show's benefit. It came off as a more leisurely paced episode, and the visuals and character interactions effectively showcased that. It's too bad we didn't get to see what he could have done with another installment. I could see this style working for a few other stories that came down the road. Hyder refuses to cross the gate without Rip, so he walks down the eternal road that supposedly has no end. After sitting for a moment to contemplate his situation, another man comes upon the pair. He says he's an angel, here to collect Hyder to enter heaven. When Simpson explains they just came from a gate they claimed to be heaven, the angel says that was actually the entrance to hell. They often try to trick men and women inside, even up to the last possible second. In the real heaven, dogs are allowed. In fact, all the wholesome things Hyder loves are just beyond the authentic heavenly gate. Before he walks in, though, he asks the angel about his wife. The entity tells Simpson that Rachel will be along directly and won't have to worry about being fooled by the demon down the road. Content, the old man and his dog pass into paradise together. Whether you like this episode or not, this was a great line.
A man, well, he'll walk right into hell with both eyes open. But even the devil can't fool a dog.
The ending twist of the first gatekeeper actually luring people into hell gives this story the slight danger it needed to fit in well as a Zone tale. I like that this is foreshadowed a bit by smoke billowing out beyond the bend in the road, suggesting hellfire and eternal damnation awaits. There's also a nice touch included with the myth of raccoons leading dogs to their demise underwater. All that combined with the signs Rachel was getting give this installment a nice background dose of rural lore. This is just a charming, pleasant, and more straightforward episode of this series that I really liked. I don't think The Hunt is an appropriate title, and it's probably too goofy for some, I understand that, but this had a heartfelt tone to it that mixed into a bittersweet final result. It's a hearty recommendation from me. Check it out. The story is just a reminder that all dogs go to heaven in the Twilight Zone.
Welcome to heaven, Mr. Simpson.
Come along, Rip.